Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, and as always, I'd like to welcome to the show our co-host, Christy from PackYourPixieDust.com. How are you doing today, Christy?
Hi, I'm well. Well, I'm suffering from some little illness, but besides that, I'm well.
Okay, maybe I shouldn't ask that question anymore. How are you doing? What is the age when people start telling you everything about all their illnesses and stuff like that? We're not quite there yet, are we?
Well, I'm not telling you my ailments, in total. It's just that I'm currently sick.
Okay.
It's annoying.
Yeah, it's that stuff that just doesn't go away this time of year. Well, we are going to talk about your trip down to Cuba, but before we do that, we got a couple just kind of housekeeping things or some things to talk about beforehand. And the first one, and I mentioned it on a previous show, that we are kind of trying to streamline our contacts because we've been getting so many different contacts. I've been having a hard time keeping up, and I know you probably are too, Christy, as far as keeping track of where everybody's at, whether Twitter or Facebook or whatnot. So we've come up with two different emails. One is steve@dclpodcast.com, so that's how to get a hold of me, and we'll just kind of use that going forward. If you'd like to come on the show, we really want to have you on. And Christy, go ahead and give everybody yours.
Mine is Christy@PackYourPixieDust.com. You will put that in the show notes, but it's CHRISTY@PackYourPixieDust.com.
Exactly. And you can always go over to Christy's page, PackYourPixieDust.com, and she's got all her travel information over there if you want to book a trip with you, right, Christy?
Yes.
Feel free to reach out on Twitter and Facebook. We're not saying don't reach out on Twitter and Facebook or anything like that, but just trying to streamline things because we've had so many people contact us that want to come on the show, and we want to get you on, and just trying to do a little bit better job of making sure that we keep everything kind of in one spot so we can make sure that we get back to you and get you scheduled to come on and share your trip. So,
and then this allows Steve and I also to email with you and with each other to find a schedule and a time that works for all of us so that we can all see the email versus a private message on one of the other channels.
Yeah. One of the things, just behind the scenes for our show, I know other shows, they record on certain days, but between my schedule traveling and your schedule, Christy, we just can't do that. So we kind of, each month it's a little bit different. And so we try to do the best we can to work with you on what day would work for you, but then also works for us. And so having a better contact, I think, is going to make it a little bit easier to get a hold of everybody.
Agreed.
So we didn't really talk about this too much, or we haven't had a chance to talk about it. The 2020 summer cruise sailings were released. Any thoughts stand out on any of the sailings for you, Christy?
It's just amazing how popular some of the European cruises were this year. And I believe the Greek Isles, both of those cruises sold out by the time they hit to silver. Now, likely what would have happened is people will have placed a hold and then canceled. And so those sailings or those cabins would have been available again, but it was basically sold out by the time it opened to the public. That is amazing.
Yeah. Hawaii did the same thing, and I don't think Hawaii's come back. I've been stocking the Greek ones, and they do, like you said, they went to guaranteed cabins that you could get on all the different levels, and now there are one or two cabins open, but the price went up, and like you said, they were sold out. But Hawaii itself has not come back at all, so I'm sure those Greek ones will be sold out by the time they sail.
The Fantasy had some unique itineraries as well, so some different ones, like they had a shorter itinerary and a longer itinerary, so that was new for the summer. The Dream is doing the double dips at Castaway Cay again, which is my absolute favorite cruise. We are doing the 5-night this year for that cruise. It's just so fun to go to Castaway Cay so many times. Obviously, the Wonder is doing their Alaska cruises again. And you booked something, right?
We did. We jumped on one of those Greek cruises. We booked the first one. We actually had a cruise set up for spring break, and we decided to move that cruise into the summer because the very first Greek cruise that cruises into Crete, my wife, when she was in high school, spent some time there. And not only are we going to be in Crete where she spent time, we're going to be there on her birthday. So, and then on top of that, we're going to be there we're going to be on board the ship on our oldest son's birthday. So all those things kind of factored into, we had been, oh my gosh, this is kind of all over the place, but we were been planning actually next summer to sail the Greek Isles on a different cruise line with our friends. We've since changed that to a Canadian cruise. And so when Disney announced the Greek one, we're just like, hey, and it lined up with all those dates. It was just meant to be. So yeah, we booked the first Greek one going out of Civitavecchia again.
That's super exciting.
Yeah, no, we're totally excited about that. So now we got to figure out how to get over there and do it. So.
Yes, always the fun part.
Yeah. So stand by for that. We'll kind of keep you filled in when kind of keep everybody filled in as far as our plans, as far as planning to get over to Europe and when that cruise comes around a little ways out. But, you start thinking about it. It seems like a long ways out when you book it, but it's going to be here before you know it.
For sure. Something that we haven't talked about before, and this sort of only works for Delta Airlines, but Delta Vacations has amazing prices to Europe. Dave does it every year. He has to go for work, and his boss actually even booked a Delta Vacations trip. He may have gone with a different airline, but if you book it as a package, so you have to have so many nights hotel, I think it's 3 total nights, and maybe off the record, I realize we're recording, but off the record, one of those nights could be at a cheaper hotel that maybe you don't actually step foot in while you're on the cruise, but you can get killer airfare prices. Like, for example, for this January trip he was going on to wherever in Europe he was going, it was $2,500 to book direct with Delta, but for the exact same flights to book with Delta Vacations, it was like $1,000.
Wow.
And it included hotels.
Wow. That's kind of the going airfare for Europe round trip right now is about $1,000. I mean, I know you can find it cheaper out of certain places, certain times, but at least from the West Coast, that's a pretty good deal if you get 3 nights in a hotel as well.
Well, right. And again, in his particular case, they had very specific dates they had to fly, and there was all kinds of things involved. For whatever reason, Europe is still stuck in that you need a Saturday night stay, and that drops the price of airfare. But like for them and their work trip, that would have meant being away from their family longer for work when they didn't need to be. So they didn't do that. But that savings will correlate to everything else. So if Delta.com might be selling it for $2,000 or $1,500 or $1,000, it's going to be cheaper with Delta Vacations. So somebody can reach out to me or their travel agent to look into that. Even if that's not necessarily the first airline you would use, I mean, those are great prices. So they should be looked into. It does not work for any other airline as far as I know. Like we tried with United and they just don't have anything like it.
Well, I'm going to have to look at it when we start looking. We're going to try and use miles and points to get over there, but yeah, we'll see what we have. Might have to take a look at that as well too, just to see what that price is out at. So
yes, compare your options.
Definitely. Just a couple other things for the summer 2020 that we saw, and I hadn't heard anybody else really talk about this, but Adventures by Disney actually added on sailings down to the Caribbean on board the Fantasy. So you can book an add-on Adventures by Disney adventure with your cruise. So you pay for the cruise and you pay for the Adventures by Disney add-on, and they're available on 7-night Eastern and Western Caribbean sailings out of Port Canaveral on the Fantasy.
Yeah, and just look at it. I think some of the Adventures by Disney trips are amazing and look amazing, and I'm sure that people will find value with that one, but that Caribbean one does not seem as useful to me.
Yeah, I'm really thinking like the Eastern, when you only have 2 stops plus Castaway Cay, you've got 3 days on the ship. I don't know. I'd have to really look and think about that one. So the prices are a little bit cheaper than what you're going to find over in Europe. But yeah, like Kirsty said, kind of maybe take a look at it, and maybe some of the things that they're offering you might be able to find in concierge. Obviously not in the port adventure days, but maybe during the ship stay itself.
Now, the add-on for the Alaskan cruise, I think, would be amazing. Or Europe, for example. There's just so much to actually want those guides for. But if everybody's done the Caribbean 100 times and are looking to do something different or have a different different viewpoint, then that would be good too.
That's a good point right there. So if you book it and you sail on it, reach out to us afterwards, because we'd love to hear what your thoughts were about ABD in the Caribbean. So
yes.
Other than that, anything else about the 2020 sailing stand out for you?
No.
Well, let's segue into Cuba then. You just got back from Cuba. I was kind of following around, saw some of the pictures from down there. I guess what made you decide to want to go to Cuba? And then why don't we talk about some of your tips and some of the pre-planning that it took to go there? My
friend actually is the reason that I went. So she said, hey, let's go to Cuba. And I said, sure, in a couple years. And then that couple years came up, and it was time to book something. And then we had actually booked a different trip, and that one was canceled because there wasn't enough people. And then we found this particular trip online, and it worked out perfectly because we could make our own air arrangements so that I could fly my beloved Delta. And sorry, Steve, but you know that you guys don't fly out here as often.
And we don't fly to Cuba.
And you don't fly to Cuba.
Not anymore. We used to, but not anymore. Anyways, go ahead.
So I could fly and book my own flights. And then it was great because I was only gone 3 nights. I mean, I was gone basically an entire 4 days, but I was only gone 3 nights. So that's always nice for me. So I don't have to leave home as much.
And since you flew down there, I guess we should say this wasn't a cruise. This was a land vacation.
It was.
So what were some of the things that you had to think about as far as going to Cuba? Did the tour company take care of, now you're going to have to get a visa to enter, I believe? Did they take care of that type of stuff? And what were some of the things that you had to do beforehand?
Yes. So we needed a certificate of the reason we were going. And that document I apparently have to save for 5 years. And because I was the travel agent of record, I have to save it for my friend as well. You have to keep those documents for 5 years per the United States government, and they can ask to see them at any time. They can do an audit of the people who went to Cuba, and then you have to show the documentation of why you went and the certificate to go. So our tour operator provided that, and then they also provided a link to get our visa. Now, it looks like you can get a visa for $50 from your airline, or at least depending on your airline. Delta offered it, and they offered to get it while you were at the airport. But we did it through the tour operator who did it through whoever. It was $75, but it all just came to our house with exactly how to fill it out and on their special Cuban colored paper. And so I knew it was going to be right. So I was happy with that. Also, Cuba requires you to have medical insurance if you're from the United States and you are going there. And the U.S., it appears that the U.S. airlines that sell travel to Cuba from the United States actually puts that fee in your airline ticket so that your medical insurance is covered. So you need to keep you have to keep your ticket that you used to get on the airplane that they scanned. So I would actually recommend that you print off your ticket and not just use the phone version if you have it, because the Cuban government can ask for that anytime, and you're supposed to be able to provide it to indicate that you have medical insurance.
Okay.
And it's in your ticket somehow.
Okay.
So that was some of the weird stuff. And, we only booked this trip like 2 months before. You and I had talked before the show about what it cost. It cost about $1,540 a person. And that included basically all of our food. It did include all of our food. It included some drinks, a certain amount of drinks with each meal. And drinks was just a drink. So if you wanted your drink to be water, you got water. If you wanted your drink to be a mojito, you got a mojito. Some of the restaurants had a few choices that they worked with, but then some of them, one of the drinks was going to be water, and then you got to pick something for your other drink. So that's just something, whatever. That's the way this company did it. We got our hotel stay. I don't know that I mentioned that yet. And our hotel was really good. And then it included all of our transportation. So the only other thing we had to pay for were tips. Tips at the restaurants and tips for our tour guide and driver, plus anything you wanted to purchase. And then one of the other pre-trip considerations was money.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that with the tips and stuff.
Yeah, so they do not accept credit cards. So American credit cards are not accepted in Cuba. And actually, Cubans don't have credit cards. And they don't use credit cards for anything. They have an ATM card, and they can go to their bank and pull money out, but everything's cash as of right now in that country. So I don't know, that's just so different. And a couple of the people on our tour actually ran out of money towards the end, and some of us were loaning other people money and then working on getting the money back at the end of it was very interesting. They say that you should have at least $100, if you're a part of a tour, you should have $100 a day of U.S. money. I actually had 100 euros that I took with me, or just under 100 euros. And I was able to exchange the euros going in or when I arrived. And I didn't get charged the 13% tax, basically, or fee to exchange dollars for the Cuban. They're called kooks. CUC, that's the Cuban money that we get, which is basically a dollar for dollar, except that on dollars, they charge 13%. Euros are basically a dollar for dollar. I think you get a tiny bit more kooks per euro. You do that at the airport. So for this particular tour, we got off. There was like our plane we had to take a bus basically to the terminal. We went right to immigration. Oh, and so many people spoke English. There was very little people that didn't speak English. And some at least spoke some English, but I did not have experiences. And in all like the touristy places, the waiters, all English everywhere. I was very surprised by that. So even the immigration people spoke English. I was very worried about my food because all the paperwork said that you can't bring food into Europe. But with my allergy, I was just worried that I wouldn't be able to eat somewhere and there were times where I had to have a snack just because it'd be so many hours until our next meal. And so I would keep my granola bars. I was worried that my food was going to be taken, and they scan your luggage. So when you arrive in the country, they put your luggage through a scanner. They also require that your prescriptions are in their original prescription bottle. So you can't like throw them a little medicine container or something else. You have to have those in the bottle. It was a little bit unknown how it was going to work with just cold medicine or other things. But what I did, and I didn't have any issue with this, but I did take a picture of all the bottles or my vitamins too. I took a picture of the vitamin bottle and then had those in a bag so that I could show them the bottle if somebody asked me, I guess. I just wanted to be prepared. So you go through immigration. The guy was there with the sign that said my name. Well, most of my name. They left out some letters, but my name was there. And he asked if I needed, he didn't even ask. He said, okay, you have to go and exchange money. I'll be back in a minute for you. So he took me to the money exchange. All of my lines went very easily. Like I was out of that airport in 15 minutes, maybe 10. But my friend who was in a different terminal on a different airline, she had a hard time everywhere. Like the line for the money was really long. The line for immigration was really long. They searched her bag. They took her passport for a little bit. And I think she was there for an additional like hour and a half.
Wow.
And then we were sent in a cab and dropped off at the airport. And it was each person. So like, because I had a different time and a different airline, I had my own cab.
So that's kind of, I was going to ask you about that, I guess. So you answered a bunch of my questions already as far as, no, that's good. As far as the money goes. And so you take the cab to the hotel from the airport. So this is a big group tour, right?
Well, there was 12 of us total.
Okay. Well,
one more thing on the money really quick. Sure. I opted to just change $100 and I ended up needing a little bit more. Our tour guide actually himself said, and I had read that I could go to the hotel. There was this big hotel, the National, that's all popular by the water. That was just a block away from our hotel. And then I thought that potentially I could exchange more money at my hotel, but I didn't want to have to exchange too much. I exchanged 100 euros, and I think I ended up needing about $50 additional myself for tips. But I really didn't buy much of anything, like one tiny little gift for Blake. Oh, and coffee.
Oh, and coffee too, yeah. So I know what it was that I was going to ask you. You kind of gave so they give you an example of $100 a day. Did you think that was about right, or what would you kind of put out there for people?
I mean, I ended up needing much less, and it does depend if you're on a tour and you have to spend your own money or not. I bought drinks. Like, we bought drinks throughout at various times, and I bought a little bit of food at our hotel, but none of those things were needed to be purchased.
Okay.
So I think $100 a day would be too much, but it really depends too. There was a guy in our group who bought artwork. My traveling companion bought a bunch of rum. And this is a fun fact about rum. The rum is the exact same price everywhere in Cuba. So whether you buy it at the airport, whether you buy it at the rum museum store thing, whether you buy it at the cigar store, like they have a cigar factory store as well, exact same price everywhere. So you cannot get a different price for your rum. I opted to not buy rum because I didn't want to check my luggage on the way home.
Okay, so $100 a day if you're not buying a lot of stuff. If you're planning on buying a lot of things, maybe budget a little bit
No,
more?
I think it's $100 a day if you're buying stuff.
Okay.
And you're a part of a tour.
Okay. And one last thing, not to overkill the money, just from when friends of mine that flew into Cuba, our company used to fly to Cuba. They don't anymore. But just like you said, euros and Canadian dollars, I think has some of the best exchange rates. If you can bring Canadian dollars rather than American dollars, you'll get a much better exchange rate as well.
And I did check, because I had time in between my 2 flights. I checked on my outbound flight at the money exchange place at the airport. And by the time they did their fees of converting them out and potentially converting them back, it was going to be about $15 per 100. So there wasn't an advantage at a money exchange place to convert the money, because the airport was going to only charge 13%. And actually, our tour guide actually said that they can exchange money, which is what I ended up doing. And they do it at about 90%. So only 10% they charge.
Oh,
so that is a possibility as well.
Okay. So looking at your guys' itinerary, this is almost like kind of like a sort of Adventures by Disney thing, loosely, in the sense that you guys are all coming from different places. You meet at the hotel, and then it looks like you have kind of a welcome dinner that night. How was the hotel itself? So you guys stayed at the same hotel the whole time, right?
Yes. So we stayed at the Hotel Capri in Havana. It was a block away, like I said, from that National Hotel. It was a really good hotel. I mean, let's be honest. In comparison to what star level of a 4 or 5 star hotel in the United States, they claim they're like a 5-star hotel, and perhaps in Cuba they are. But I would put them, except that they were very clean and the staff was all amazing. They were amazing. But I would put them at like a 2 to 3 star hotel. So maybe a 3. But it really, like, I felt safe. The cleaning person that we had, and we ended up having her the whole time, was amazing. And like the first day I got there, I was like, oh, there's no coffee or something in the room. And she had coffee for me the next day. I think we had to ask for extra toilet paper or something, and there were several rolls of that the next day. I mean, so they were really responsive. And for sure, I would say for the value and the location, I would stay there again.
Perfect.
It is not in the old Havana part, so it's in the greater Havana area or something like that, but it's over by the water and it's over by the National, to give people an idea, because that National is a very famous hotel, I guess.
So in a good area of town. But you might not want to stay in the old Havana part anyways. Is that kind of the party district, sort of?
It probably is, yeah.
So I don't know, maybe.
And like that's where the cruise ships dock, so it's going to be more crowded there.
Yeah.
And maybe more touristy.
Yeah, so maybe a better place to stay anyway. So, all right.
This hotel, too, had a rooftop pool and bar, which was awesome. Like, the bartenders were great. Fun, random fact, the Cuban, because, you know, they're socialist, and they assign jobs, but some people get to pick it. I still need to know more about that. But there is a lifeguard at our hotel every day, and they are assigned by the Cuban government to say where they're going that day. So they're certified to be a lifeguard. Sometimes they're assigned at our hotel. Sometimes they're assigned at the beach. Huh. And they prefer the beach because it's more work. You know, the hotel was pretty dead.
Yeah, okay, there's not much going on there. They're kind of bored.
Yeah.
That's kind of funny.
But it was so cool. It was like a pool on the 18th floor.
Oh, cool.
So I went there a couple of times. Somehow we were told to meet at 7. I don't remember how we got that information for that first day. So we met, and that first dinner was really late. So definitely needed more snacks that day. But we went, they took us to these really unique places. Like that place was in this really ritzy part of Havana, and it was all basically farm to table food. So their menu changes all the time. It was just super unique. It was very unique.
Did you guys sit as a group then, or how did that work? Okay.
Yep. Each of the places that we went to knew we were coming and had spots for the 12 of us. And then on the last day, our guide and driver actually sat with us as well.
Okay.
But the other days, they sat by themselves.
And who kind of went on this tour? So you and your friend were on it, but who were somebody like your traveling companions, just out of curiosity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so random. We were the youngest, so we're both in our early 40s. And I would say most of the people were in their 50s. And then there was a couple whom I absolutely adored that were in their late 70s. And 4 of them knew each other. So they came from different locations, but then we're going on a cruise after. So they knew each other. And then including myself, there were 3 attorneys on this tour. I just think that's so random. I mean, my friend is an attorney as well.
Yeah.
But then there was one other attorney, and then one of the ones in the late 70s is a doctor.
Wow. Well, there's always doctors on vacation. Doctors are going to be bad. This is a total side note. Whenever we have a medical emergency on the plane, there's always a doctor. So to me, it's like There's always doctors on vacation, it seems like. So if you're a doctor, I really didn't mean to step on your toes. I love the doctors. So it's always awesome to have them on board. I'm glad
it's useful, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So, well, cool. So kind of an eclectic, different group of traveling companions there. So is Cuba kind of like Spain in the sense that like that Mediterranean, I get that Mediterranean feel that they just eat later in the evening anyways?
Well, so our guide said no, that most of them eat at like 6 o'clock.
Okay.
So our later dinners were late for them.
Okay. So it just happened to work out that way based on everybody probably arriving and everything else that first evening?
Yes. And then this is the other thing he said that's interesting, that Cubans don't feel like they relate to Latinos. So, and like, Mexico type and maybe the Spanish culture, things like that. And they don't feel like they relate to the Caribbean culture. Like, I expected to eat chips and salsa at some point on this trip. I don't know why, but I guess I thought Cuba is still, do they speak Spanish? I'm going to have chips and salsa. There was no chips and salsa. And there's actually very little gluten in most of their food. They do serve bread, so obviously that had gluten. And for everybody, for a sneak preview at the end, I had no gluten reactions on this entire trip. There were many of our meals were family style, and they would just make me a plate in the back instead of having to be a part of the family style, since people were served bread ahead of time. Like, they'll fry fish sometimes, but they fry very little. So that was very unique to me.
Was it spicy?
No, they don't do spicy either.
Okay.
Apparently, Cuban spices are cumin, salt, pepper, and onion and garlic. The food was good. It was not exciting.
Okay.
And there were different levels of good food. And we all ate, and no one disliked their food. One woman had more allergies and issues than I did, and so she ate less overall, but they would have worked with her as well.
So this is basically 4 days, of which you're really spending 2 full days kind of traveling around and seeing different parts of Havana and Cuba, looking at your guys' itinerary. Before we get into what you guys did the next day, just overall, so once dinner was over, you said it was late, I'm guessing you probably just went back to the hotel or whatnot, but could you go out on your own, or how did that work?
You could have.
Okay.
Always.
Okay.
And prior to going to dinner, I actually walked down to that National Hotel so I could see it, and I had a drink there and just sat at the water and looked out. It was gorgeous. It was so nice. So you could do what you wanted when you weren't doing the tour, and you can also sort of do what you wanted on the tour. So they actually took us to this place called, I guess, the Buena Vista Social, and it was like one of those old school clubs. And honestly, everybody in the group, and remember, they're in their 50s and maybe 60s, but I think 50s and then 70s, all loved it. It was the big music and dancing and loud, and the guy talking in the microphone, it was loud. And I was so exhausted. And our guide was actually going back to the hotel to do some paperwork. So I was just like, can I go back to the hotel and go to bed? Because I had to get up at 4 that day to get out there, to get to the airport, to make the connection, etc. I was done. After dinner.
Okay.
So you had those choices too, to do something or to not do something.
Okay. And overall, did you feel safe?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. I hate to ask that question, but just
No.
out of curiosity, all right.
Even when I was walking, because it was at dusk, when I was walking down to the hotel by myself and coming back, I did not have any concerns at all.
Well, let's move into Saturday then. Let's talk about some of the things you got to experience.
Saturday was our biggest day of touring. It was just sort of like boom, 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 like all day long, tons of things. So we went and did plazas in Old Havana and walked around and saw the different areas, including some of the old churches. They're not a religious people either, which is just interesting. They have a couple of churches, but most people don't go to them. So that was so interesting to me.
That's part of the socialism thing, I think.
Yeah, maybe.
Or communism, I guess is what I should say,
right.
Not socialism, communism.
Yeah. And then we went to the Museum of Rum, which basically, we went to a cigar factory as well, but we didn't go into the factory. We just went to the store so that people could buy the cigars. And we learned that cigars basically had between 4 and 6 ingredients. And depending on how cheap the cigar is how many fillers it would have, versus the better cigars had less of the filler and more of the good stuff.
Okay.
So, yeah. So the men on our trip, the people who partake in smoking cigars, really loved the cigars. And then that's also where we learned that the rum is the same price everywhere. So lots of people bought rum. And it was great because we had our bus, so we could just put things on the bus. Like there'd be times where we'd be walking, and then also times where we had our bus. So if there was buying something, anytime I swear that it was going to be time to buy something, our bus was always available and we could shove something in there. And it was always secure. Oh, at the Rum Museum, they had sugarcane juice, which was so good. And they had this big old machine where they actually grinded out the sugarcane. So if somebody has that opportunity, pay for that juice. And then we did it with the rum, and I asked the lady who was selling it whether I should get the light colored rum or the dark colored rum. She said the dark colored rum is better, so I went with that. It was very good. And I drank a lot of rum that weekend. There were mojitos everywhere. We became mojito connoisseurs. It was a very rum-centric trip.
So just to go back to the cigars, could you buy them and bring them back to the States? Did they have any restrictions on that?
You could buy them and you could bring them back. They did tell me, I feel like, a limit. Uh-huh. And there was a rule that you are supposed to only use them for personal use.
Okay.
And actually, one of my colleagues asked for a particular cigar, but he wanted only a certain kind. So you know how they have those wrappers, and some of them are Romeo and Juliet, and some of them say something else? Back in the olden days, those wrappers were started because when they were first making cigars, they needed to put that little wrapper on it to keep it together or something. Mm-hmm. And those were books that they ripped those pages out and put them. And that's how it all started, with the names of the cigars. They were basically pages out of books.
Really? So Romeo and Juliet, they used the Romeo and Juliet book too. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And then the name just stuck ever since then.
Yeah.
And then there's some cigars, like my colleague wanted a certain type, I don't remember, something with an M, that they didn't have this season because that crop that made that one or something they hadn't had it for a couple of years, I guess. So I don't remember what the limit of cigars were, but you had to you had to claim they were for personal use.
Okay. I know there used to be a limit on it. I should have looked it up before we talked about it. Okay. So you guys do the cigar museum, the rum museum, and then where'd you head after that?
We walked along the Street of Trades, which it used to be where, in the olden days, where all the things were sold. And like food and crafts and slaves, apparently, were sold in the square. Oh, we talked about the real estate. So it is so weird. You know how there's apartment buildings that people will own an apartment in, and then there's a homeowners association, or there's somebody who's running the building and all that money is sort of pooled together to do fixing on the outside of the building? Mm-hmm. They don't have that there. Each person owns their apartment, and if they decide to keep up the surrounding areas, they do. What ends up happening, he says, is when the building as a whole can't be saved, they create a park, which sounded like a joke to me, but there was a park on all these corners, and they would be like, well, this is where a building was that couldn't be saved, so they made it into a park. But basically, when the apartment gets too crappy, they just go live somewhere else. Huh. That's so weird to me.
Different.
It's such a unique trip.
So going along the Avenue of the Arts, walking along there, did you feel, and I think this is like the magic of going to Cuba now before it gets busier and opens up even more, but like, did it feel touristy at all, or did it just feel more genuine? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
I feel like you could tell from some of my pictures that I had already posted on Instagram, and I'll keep posting more, but that many of the parts felt genuine. Now, in the old Havana, where the cruise ships dock, and right in those main, the biggest squares, all those buildings are pristine, but the buildings everywhere else aren't. And I feel like that feels more real. And just people going about their day and working. And I had the earliest flight on Monday. everybody else, some of our schedule got a little messed up. So the Hemingway Museum would have been a part of our tour, but it was getting late and we all opted to take a break. And the guide said, well, Christy, you will miss this if we take a break. And I said, I'm fine with missing the Hemingway. It wasn't my top thing to go and experience. And so, and I went swimming. It was great. I preferred my break. So they all went to the Hemingway Museum the next day, but I left when people were going to work in the morning, and it was so fascinating to watch. So there's a lot of either shared cabs where people will take a cab from place to place and they all just share in the cost, and they stand in line. And our tour operator, his car was being worked on, so he actually used this shared cab thing to get home every day after the tour was over. And he would be like, well, it's like a 20-minute drive, but by the time you walk to the shared cab spot and you walk home and you wait for the cab, it takes about an hour. But it costs like $2 instead of $20. So like there's a lot of people that use public transportation. I guess the buses cost pennies. And then a lot of people will use the shared cabs and or drive their cars. Most of the cars are like from the 80s and are Russian. And some of them are shiny Russian cars from the 80s, and some of them are, older shiny cars from the 80s. All the cabs, though, were really pretty current. Smaller, but current. And then I saw like one Mercedes or something on the road.
So you're saying ride sharing came from Cuba, huh? So what we're doing now with Uber.
Probably.
when you click on Uber for the ride share, and like three of you jump in the Uber and eventually make it to where you're going, it all started in Cuba, huh?
Yep.
There you go. Well, cool. So you go back and swim instead of doing you guys skipped the Hemingway Museum, I guess. What did you guys do that evening then?
That evening was dinner. So dinner was a little bit further out of town. And it was like we went under this really cool, I remember this part. We went under this really cool tunnel. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like being in the Detroit to Windsor tunnel. So it is under the water. And it is how they get to the west side of Cuba or something is what it's called, on the other side of the water. Okay. So that was really fun. And then we had dinner out there, and then we came, I think we were still on the other side of the water, and we went to a cannon firing.
Oh.
And they do this every single night at 9 p.m. And it's a whole thing, and there's tons of people, and it gets super dark. So like the young Cubans go and make out with each other. And apparently all their parents trust them there because it's very safe. And so the teenagers are all allowed to go there, and then they all make out with each other.
It's like a big dating scene of the cannon firing, huh?
and they do like a play fight, with the old school men. And then they fight their cannon, or they fire their cannon, 9 o'clock.
Is this right downtown Havana, or?
No, it's off in one of the forts.
Okay.
I guess there's like 3 forts. And it's at one of them.
So then did you venture out after that, or did you just head back to the hotel?
Head back to the hotel.
Okay. So Sunday, I kind of like this. So you get a little bit of history, kind of like old Havana, talking about Hemingway, and then you do education and arts on Sunday. Talk about what you did Sunday.
Yeah, so Sunday we had a professor, and unfortunately we also had daylight savings time, so it felt a little early. But this professor talked about something different he does something different for each of the tours. And this particular day, he did music. And so he went through all of the different music of Cuba. And it was interesting. It went a little long for me, honestly, but that's just me. Other people really loved the whole entire discussion. But they talked about it like there are these pipes or poles that get used, and that is from the African influence. And then there's also, and they did a little bit, obviously, because slaves were a big part, especially with the sugar and the rum production. They needed the people to do the work. And that's always, when it's a big part of the history, that is important information. But of course, it's sad. And so there was a bit of discussion about that, but just the different music and like some of the jazz music that comes through, it was really interesting. Then we went to this place. There's like this house of the ceramic person, Jose Fuster is how this guy's name is. He like used little pieces of tile and little pieces of ceramic to basically decorate his house. And then from there, it grew to basically being decorating the neighborhood. And so his artwork basically takes over this whole neighborhood in another part of Western Cuba, Western Havana. And it was just really interesting. And then they have like neighbors come in, and that artist was actually there. So he met people and took some pictures. And they have neighbors come in and cook lunch for special tours. So there was 2 groups of us that were having lunch there that day. And there's like this specialty fried fish. And then I had the chicken, because I always have the chicken. It was also very unique. We were there quite a while though.
Okay.
Because then we had to wait because we had a ride in the American vintage cars.
So I had some friends do that. They flew down there. They had a trip down to Cuba.
Just to drive in the car?
No, they actually had an overnight in Cuba, and that's what they did. They went out and they did a tour in the 1950s American vintage car. So where did they go? Did you just drive around Havana, or what did you guys do with that?
So they're usually for like a half an hour to an hour is how long you rent one of these cars. And ours took us from this art place in the one part of Havana, and then it drove us to a parking lot to take pictures. I don't understand what happened there and why we were there. I missed some part of the description of why we were there. But people took some pictures. You could, in theory, switch cars if you wanted, but I'm pretty sure everybody just went in the same car they'd already been going in. And then they just drove us to our hotel.
It is a big deal. I mean, the cars are really amazing. And actually,
it was.
Yeah, the friends that we went, their car broke down. And so,
oh, no.
Yeah, so but they got them another car within like about 15 minutes. So they were back on their way again. So kind of cool. So go check out Christy's Instagram page, because you've got a picture of you with the car up on it, I think, don't you?
Yep,
yeah,
I do.
So if you want to see those cars, they're pretty cool.
I requested a pink car, and I got a pink car.
Nice.
It was fun.
So you guys finish up with your dinner Sunday night, kind of a farewell dinner. I'm telling you, this sounds like ABD to me. But
our dinner was in some other famous restaurant. And here's what's interesting too. So some of the restaurants and the stores, people just make as part of their house. Like they take a house and they open it up and they become a restaurant. This restaurant we went to on the last night was definitely a house at one point. Oh, and that night actually too, so we had taken a break. So after the cabs, we took a break. The thing I loved about our tour guide as well is he would ask us what we wanted. And some people wanted to go to some of the local bars, and there were bars that like Hemingway had gone to and just the popular touristy bars. Our tour guide said Floridita was his favorite tourist bar, and he said it has the best bartender in Cuba, and they have daiquiris, and everybody just has to drink these rum daiquiris. And they don't maybe look like what we're used to, but we went there before dinner, and it was a very good daiquiri. And it was a super fun place with live music, and it was just super fun. The place we went to the last night had my favorite food, and it was also a place that was like very popular for the locals, and then the tourists sort of took over, and our guide said at the end, he's like, yep, all of those people are tourists. Oh, no. So it used to be locals, and now it's like in the top 10 of restaurants. It's called El Atelier. I don't know how to say that. Atelier. So I ate the beef, and it was my favorite. Most of my food was chicken with cumin and like baked, basically, baked. It looked like pulled pork, but it was never pork, or at least mostly wasn't pork. It was beef. Mm-hmm. This beef had, our guide said, like it was molasses wine or a dry cooking wine, but not sherry, but made with actual sugar cane. It was so good. I cannot wait for somebody I know to go to Cuba and to check their luggage and to get me this, because my beef was so memorable. So that, yes, their dry cooking wine with actual sugarcane is amazing. And they also had fried taro root, which was random and very yummy and completely gluten-free. So I got to experience that.
I've actually had that before. That's really good.
It was really good. Yeah. Like really good.
Well, I know you're a dessert fan. Do they have desserts, or what kind of dessert fans do they have?
Everybody got dessert but me.
Oh,
so
no.
I know.
Was it gluten?
That particular yes.
Oh.
That particular restaurant, I didn't get offered any dessert.
Okay.
Most of the places I had fruit, and in one place I had this amazing. I think everybody did. It was like passion fruit with this really amazing soft cheese. Oh my gosh, it was so good. But everybody else got like pudding or pudding with cookies, or I don't even remember, but I got fruit. And most of the time it was good. I didn't gain weight. And there's not a lot of salt in their food. You know how usually when you go away, and you probably have to experience this because you travel all the time, but the food in restaurants, and especially touristy type places, is so salty. And it was not like that there.
Yeah, I try and stay away from chain restaurants, so we try and find places that are local, and you seem to, and my guess is the food there is pretty fresh too. Well, then you get the evening free. Did you guys head out afterwards, or what did you do?
No, it was really late because we did that bar. It ended up being pretty late by the time we got back.
Okay. So your last day, I guess, Monday, you guys head back to the airport. How was kind of leaving Cuba and just the whole flight out of there, I guess?
Yeah, it was good. I guess everybody else, like I said earlier, went to the Hemingway Museum, but I left and went, and they had the taxi come and pick me up and take me out. And I said, why am I getting to the airport 3 hours early? And they said, because what if your taxi breaks down on the way? I was like, oh. Or not, why am I getting to the airport 3 hours early? I was like, why am I leaving for the airport three or 3.5 hours early? So that's why, because they worry, just like your friend whose taxi broke down, same concept. They want to make sure we're not like broken on the side of the road and we have time to get to the airport.
Okay.
So the airport, I guess the terminal where Delta is the newer terminal and cleaner, because my friend flew in on Southwest and out on Delta, and she said the other terminal was just like dark and crowded and not as nice as the terminal that Delta was out of. And so I found it to be fine. They basically tell you, which there is very little information there. And it is one of those airports where none of the stands at the front are permanent. Like I watched this one airline, and I believe somebody told me it was a Venezuelan airline, arrived to set up, and they were pulling their supplies out of a shoebox. Like, so everybody jokes that they are stuck in the 50s, and some of these things, they are not kidding. But there is some stuff that is very much the 50s about Cuba. We'll talk about internet in a minute. So none of the stations are permanent, so it was really hard to figure out where you even had to go. But I eventually get to Delta. Check-in was easy. They told me to get into the immigration line about 1 hour before my flight, so I did that. And the bathrooms, they were bathrooms with toilet paper, which was nice. They tell you that you are prohibited from taking money out of Cuba, so you have to change your money over. I basically spent all my money. I did end up having a quarter that I just gave to a person who was cleaning, who was very confused at first, and I didn't remember how to say, here, have this, or this is for you, so I just gave it to her and put my hand up and walked away, because I didn't want to have money that was prohibited from being removed from the country.
Such a good rule follower.
Well, I did take out 10 cents.
To give to Blake or something? Or?
Yes.
Yeah.
I knew I had 10 cents in my purse that I was going to pretend I didn't have in my purse.
Yeah.
Don't tell the Cuban government, please. But then I had this quarter, and I was like, I gave the quarter away. So then I did not know this, but the Delta agent told my friend when she got to the airport that you can actually use U.S. money on the other side of security. So they have some restaurants and some like little pop-up stands on the other side of security, because by then, in theory, you've sold all your money back. So you can pay with U.S. dollars on the other side of security, at least in the Delta terminal in Havana. So it's a good thing to note.
Well, you talked a little bit about internet. Was there internet access at all?
So you had to buy a card. Like, remember the olden days where, oh, by the way, there are payphones everywhere in Cuba. Like, still payphones, people using them in Cuba. So that is fantastic. So remember the olden days where you had those payphone cards where you can prepay and you had to punch in like 55 numbers to make a phone call? Mm-hmm. Well, it was like that. Oh. So you could log in, and each card was only good at your particular hotel. And the card was super cheap. It was like $1.50 for an hour. It didn't always work though. So, and then you'd put in all 30 numbers, literally 30 numbers. And sometimes it just wouldn't be working. So, and then the little older couple who I was absolutely in love with, they one day were trying to get in and he's like, I just can't make it work. And I was like, can I just try? So, and you know, typing in 30 numbers accurately takes some effort sometimes. So I logged them in the one time. He's like, how did you do that? So it didn't always work. I was able to use that. In theory, I should have been able to use Verizon, my cell phone service, to text, but my texts were only received by Dave half the time. And they had to be changed to the SMS if you have an iPhone text versus the iPhone, because that usually goes through, or those iTexts or iMessages or whatever they're called.
Right.
Because those would go through Wi-Fi and you don't really have Wi-Fi. Even if you're logged in, it doesn't work like that. So I could send them email and then they could get my text more than I could get theirs. So communication was really tough. And like on my cell phone plan, so on Verizon doesn't have Travel Pass for Cuba. So it would cost $2.99 a minute to make a phone call if it was even going to work. And then it would cost, seemed like a lot of money per megabyte of data. So I turned that off and I just used the card. But then, like I said, the card didn't always work. Like in your room in the evening, the card never worked. But during the middle of the day, it would work. Or in the lobby, it would work.
Yeah, that's like some of the hotels I stay in. Like the Wi-Fi never works good in the evening because everybody's on it streaming, trying to watch their Netflix or whatever else. So no.
Oh yeah, there's no streaming on this Wi-Fi. Oh,
yeah, okay. You're like you can get your text message out. I mean, your email out, I guess.
Exactly. Sending email was a nice little challenge. It was like dial-up. It was so funny. It was like being so stuck back in the day.
Well, as we kind of wrap things up here, overall thoughts on Cuba?
Oh my God, I loved it. I want to go back for sure. It was, I wasn't sure what to expect, but I am so excited that I went. It was really, really fantastic. It felt like a good deal. Like the hotel, obviously the hotel rooms were shared. So that was based on double occupancy. You could pay a different price for yourself. The food, and you got drinks. And then I became a mojito connoisseur. We had so many mojitos. It was really a fantastic trip. I love the Cuban people too. I don't remember one person who wasn't pleasant the entire trip. Everywhere. Everybody was pleasant.
I still want to go down there before it really opens up. I would love to do this trip. I think it'd be so cool.
Yeah, it was really great. And I actually really love that it was just a weekend, that I got to go kind of get in, get out, and could go back to work on Tuesday.
And I like the fact that you got to see like a little bit of the history, but you also got to, by going out to the kind of that artistic area, that neighborhood, you got to see some of the culture that is Cuba today. So I think that's kind of cool too. So it wasn't just, go lie on the beach. I mean, those are the kind of stuff that we generally, although I love my beach vacation too, but I love those vacations where you can kind of learn, especially someplace like Cuba that you just don't know anything about. So you get to learn quite a bit about the people themselves.
Yeah, and he would answer all kinds of questions when we were transporting ourselves from one place to the next, and just it was really awesome. It was really awesome.
Okay, so Disney doesn't sail there yet. I don't know if they will anytime soon, but if you want to take a cruise down there, I was kind of looking at it as you're talking. Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, MSC, and Carnival all offer cruises down to down to Cuba with different day lengths or cruise lengths and itineraries. So you can kind of look at that. If somebody wanted to do a land vacation like this, Christy, how can they get a hold of you to kind of learn more about it and maybe book it through you?
My contact information is at packyourpixiedust.com. So obviously they know how to find me now through even the Facebook page if needed. But all my information is on Pack Your Pixie Dust and all of the different social media spots.
Perfect. So yeah, if you're interested to go to Cuba, give Christy a shout. Yeah, find her over.
It was really cool.
Yeah, packyourpixiedust.com and head on down there before they build Starbucks.
Yeah, right. There were no Starbucks. Virgin Cruise Line is also going to be in Cuba next year when they are launched.
We haven't talked about that at all, but I want to talk about that one show because it's been kind of interesting since we bought Virgin America. I've done a lot of reading about Richard Branson and who he is and whatnot, and they just started selling their cruises here, about 2 weeks, or I don't think it was a month ago, but it was fairly recently.
It was exactly a month ago because
Okay.
it was on Valentine's Day. And
Okay.
we're recording this on March 14th.
Of course they started on Valentine's Day.
And they're so weird. Like, they're going to have a tattoo parlor with 2 tattoo artists all the time. I'm just so curious how all this is going to last. It's really weird. I'm actually cruising. I have a cruise booked with my cousin. You remember. You've met her. Crazy
On
Jennifer.
Virgin?
Yes.
I didn't know you guys did that. Oh, this is going to be so much fun. I cannot wait for you guys to get back. And if anybody else goes on Virgin before Christy and her cousin, please call us because I want to talk about Virgin Cruise Lines. I think it's going to be kind of an interesting thing. And we might have to put that in a different feed just in case it's not too family friendly.
You could just warn them again.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, as we finish, I guess we better finish up before we go off the rails too much more. But if you want to get a hold of Christy or I, you can always find both of us over at Facebook at DCL Podcast. You can always find me, Steve, on Twitter at DCL Podcast. Once again, my new email address, Steve at DCLpodcast.com. And Christy, why don't you go where everybody can find you?
Christy at Pack Your Pixie Dust is my email, and I am on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as Pack Your Pixie Dust.
And if you want to come on our show and share your experiences, Adventures by Disney, Disney Cruise Line, Christy and I want to talk to you. We want to get you on. But please be patient. Like I said, we've had just quite a few people, and we want to get you all on. We're going to get you all on. But reach out to us, and we will do it. We love talking Disney Cruise Line. And I hope you enjoyed this show on Cuba. Not only do we like cruising with DCL, but just traveling in general. And I thought this would be a great show, and I really appreciate you sharing your experiences, Christy.
Absolutely. It was fun. It was such a cool trip.
Well, get a hold of Christy, and she'll send you down to Cuba, and then we'll talk to you about your Cuba trip. So, well, thanks again, Christy, and it's good talking to you as always, and we'll see you on the next show.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.